So just starting off with an introduction into the Everyday Entrepreneur Program. What you're seeing here is the collective impact of the Everyday Entrepreneur Consortium. We now have more than 100 member colleges actively participating, which tells us that this work is resonating across very different regions and communities across the United States. To date, we have supported over $700,000 in grant funding directly to support entrepreneurs who are launching new ventures or working to stabilize and scale their businesses. Importantly, we have also added 3 statewide systems this past year. Luckily, we are so grateful to work with the Maricopa Community College System, the Louisiana system, and the Maine system. Super happy to have these new states on board, not only as NACCE members, but as Everyday Entrepreneur members. Our Everyday Entrepreneur program is structured in levels. So level 1 focuses on entrepreneurial mindset. Participants build skills around problem solving and opportunity recognition that make them stronger employees, while also opening doors to side gigs and other incomes. Any college that applies for this level 1 program receives access to a toolkit, an implementation guide, a Canvas course, and a monthly consortium call where we get the opportunity to be on with all of the colleges currently enrolled in the program. Level 2 goes deeper. Participants receive additional grant funding along with more intensive coaching and mentoring. This level is designed to increase the number of viable businesses launching and to help post-revenue entrepreneurs move forward with cash-positive full employment. We currently have 16 colleges in this level 2 aspect. And finally, at our national level, we bring this work together through a nationwide pitch competition, which we will share more exciting details about later on in this presentation. Getting into the history of this program. In 2024, we reached a really important milestone by awarding $5,000 to over 50 community colleges around the country. This was a huge turning point for our program. It allowed colleges to move quickly from ideas to action. Since then, the national impact has been clear. Over 100 colleges across the country are actively participating in an Everyday Entrepreneur program that they have been able to support entrepreneurs in their communities. To date, these entrepreneurs have been so amazing to hear from. Collectively, they are generating over $1 million in revenue. We have also engaged more than 550 students in hands-on entrepreneurship programming and collectively hosted hundreds of pitch competitions that have reached thousands of entrepreneurs. What's also important is how the program continues to evolve. In 2024, we did develop the Level 2 program, which expanded support through increasing funding, coaching, and mentorship. Again, we started off with 8 colleges in 2024 and have doubled that number. So we currently are continuing to support 16 colleges. These colleges are not only supporting entrepreneurs that went through their level 1, but opening this up to a new pool of entrepreneurs in their community and at their colleges. Building on that momentum, in 2025 is when we introduced our nationwide pitch competition. This created a shared national stage for top entrepreneurs and community entrepreneurs, connecting local innovation to a broader network and elevating visibility across NACCE's ecosystem. As you can see here in these pictures, these are 2 amazing colleges that we are so grateful to work with in the program. Now, you might be wondering what makes the program so successful on some campuses. When we look at colleges that are seeing the strongest outcomes, a few consistent themes tend to rise to the top. First is active engagement in NACCE. The colleges that lean into the full NACCE ecosystem, connecting with peer institutions, tapping with staff expertise, and participating in our professional development opportunities, they tend to move faster and see stronger results. Asking questions and sharing best practices and staying connected really does matter in this program. The second key is intentional customization. The programs work best when the colleges adapt to it and to their own students and to their community colleges. Their workforce needs and their strategic priorities are also a huge value that goes into the program. When it aligns with existing pathways, credentials, and local employers or ecosystem partners, the impact accelerates rather than competes what's already happening on their campus. Amazing colleges also make sure that they have committees developed for this program in all of their different priorities and their different subjects on campus. Building that participation really does matter when making this a success on your college. And then the third factor is strategic marketing and outreach. Successful colleges start early and they communicate often. They also use multiple channels of communication, clear messaging, engaged faculty, and staff champions, and also strong community partners help drive participation and build momentum and establish great credibility for their programs on their campus. Again, once colleges join this program, we help support them on every step of the way that it takes to get started. We have guides that can help you make this a great success on your campus. And also, we have wonderful partners that are already participating that are more than willing to help you, such as you see on these two pictures, two amazing colleges that we are amazed to work with. When these three elements come together, the program doesn't just launch, it excels on your campus. Now, I could share forever about the program and the impact that it's not only had on NACCE and my life, but I think what's best is for you to hear from amazing entrepreneurs that have gone through this course. So at this moment, I'm going to share with our amazing and pass it over to our amazing Pamela Fleming, who has gone through the program at Houston City College. Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you so much, Lydia, and thank you guys for having me. Well, my name is Pam Fleming. I am the founder and CEO of Nexus Transformation Partners. We are a local boutique in Houston, Texas, change management and leadership development consultancy, and we help make change stick. So if you can transfer to the next slide. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how I turn my passion into practice. This is my transformational story. So the reality is, my work did not begin with the business idea. It began with one question. And that question was, why do organizations, period, struggle to make change stick? I've spent my career in very large transformational organizations watching brilliant strategies fail. And they didn't fail because the plan was wrong. They failed because they did not have the people portion. They did not support the people who were going through change. That tension became my vision and execution of what I wanted to do in my practice. Everything that we do today from a Nexus Transformation Partners perspective is about turning change capability into something that's sustainable and not considered disruption. And that journey started inside of one of the most structured environments imaginable, the U.S. Army. That's where I learned strategy at its best. You can go to the next slide. Okay. Once I got out of the military, I went to school and I went to school and I went to school. So I started off at Ohio State because coming out of the military, we didn't want to go back to Louisiana, but ended up going back to Louisiana anyway. So I ended up going to school at LSU and, I finished all of my schooling there. From there, I went into the Big Four. I was at PwC and places like that. They really taught me how transformation work at scale, governance, strategy, execution. I saw world-class frameworks. But one of the things that I saw, and guys, I kid you not, one of the things that I saw that these big companies did not do a very good job at was handling the human friction during periods of change. That experience in the Big Four, it actually gave me a strong technical backbone, but it also showed me that there was a huge gap between process and human behavior. And that gap became my leadership focus. You go to the next one. So I stayed in consulting for a very long time, almost 20 years. And what I decided to do is I wanted to take a stab at going into industry. I kind of stepped my toe into industry for a little while, but I went to be the associate vice president for the business transformation office at a large healthcare organization here in Houston. And the reality is I was leading people through uncertainty because, transformation is emotional. It's just not operational like most companies like to think it is, but it's not. It's a very emotional process. But somewhere in the middle of leading all of these transformations, it confirmed for me what I already knew is that we weren't struggling with change. We were struggling with how people were being supported through change. That's the piece that most organizations were missing then. And I feel like it's still a piece that most people are missing today. So eventually what I realized is I wanted to build something different, something that addressed change differently. You can go to the next slide. And so that's where my entrepreneurship leap actually took place. Leaving for me, it wasn't about just leaving to go do something. It was leaving because I wanted to build a better model. I wanted to build a practice that didn't treat change as an event, but as a human capability piece. And that leap was uncomfortable. There were bumps, there were bruises, there are still bumps and bruises that we go through. But you know what? At the end of the day, I can tell you it's been so well worth everything that I put into it that I wouldn't do anything different. And that belief is what has helped shape Nexus Transformation Partner. You go to the next slide. Now, I will say this. We don't succeed on our own as entrepreneurs. In order for us to succeed, I have to truly acknowledge that my success came with tremendous support from both HCC, Houston City College, and NACCE. I started at Houston City College Veterans Entrepreneur Program. And from there, I think a year later, I transitioned into working in the Everyday Entrepreneur Program. Together, the partnership between Houston City College and NACCE, I mean, they were a critical piece of the success that I'm experiencing today. You know, it's not just about starting a business with this collaboration. It's really about learning to think like a business owner, learning to move like a business owner. You can't just sit in the back and say, you know what, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, but I'm still gonna function like I'm an individual contributor at a job. It doesn't work that way. And this partnership really gave me the skills to move forward. And I am so grateful for all of that. For you as colleges and institutions, programs like this can only strengthen the bridge to education and the real world application because your entrepreneurs are not going to just walk away with theory. They're going to walk away understanding how to think, how to move, how to innovate, how to problem solve. That's the beauty of this partnership with NACCE. And again, you know, without it, I don't know where my business would be, but with it, I think I've come a very long way. And that's why programs like the Everyday Entrepreneurship, you know, they aren't an add-on for me. It's not a program that if you're thinking about doing, it's not an, you know, maybe I'll do it. It's not an add-on. It's a strategic advantage for both you as a college system and the entrepreneurs that you're serving. You go to the next slide. And so that brings me to our why, Nexus Transformation Partners. Why do we exist? We exist because we want to create sustainable change, not just short-term change, long-term sustainable change. We don't just install programs. We try to build internal capability because at the end of the day, any institution that we go into, our goal is to make sure that we leave them better than we found them. Our goal is to make sure that when we leave, they're in a change-ready state where they can drive their change on their own. And if they need support, of course, we're there. But the goal is to make them self-sufficient in understanding how to drive their change because transformation only stick when people are allowed the time and the space to grow with it. And that requires a new way of thinking about change. You can go to the next slide. And the reality is, guys, change is not the exception anymore. I'm going to say that again. Change is not the exception anymore. It is the environment. We are in one of the most tumultuous environments that I've seen in a very long time. And a lot of organizations have the biggest blind spots where they don't look at the behavior around what's happening in their organization and how their people are processing information, how they are reacting under pressure, how they're communicating during uncertainty. These are the things where having a change-ready mindset is really going to help you and the organization. You know, when we don't account for that human behavior, what happens? Resistance starts to look like defiance, right? Hesitation starts to look like disengagement, and misalignment starts to, you know, become conflict. We don't want all of those things to happen. But when behavior actually becomes part of your design, change stops feeling chaotic and it becomes very manageable. Okay, you go to the next slide. So that brings me to people, because at the core of transformation, it's all about people. Technology and processes can scale very quickly. I mean, I'm sure you guys have been part of a lot of ERP implementations where you're bringing in a new system. Of course, those things you can scale quickly. But at the end of the day, if you don't understand the behavior of people, why they respond the way they do, why they act and react the way they do, it's going to be a very, very hard sell and a very long uphill battle for long-term transformation. That's why I keep saying, and I say this over and over again, because growth truly requires doing something different. Okay, you go to the next slide. And that difference, it really means building new pathways, building new neural pathways. And what I mean by that is understanding what's driving that behavior, because behavior change is neurological. It requires repetition, it requires reinforcement, it requires reflection. You cannot mandate new behavior. That's just, regardless what people tell you, you cannot mandate someone act in a new way. What you have to do is you have to design an environment that supports the behavior that you're trying to see. And this is where structural leadership development really comes into place. And that's why when I talk about leadership development, I talk about how it must evolve into something different. I'm not talking about just coming in and sitting in the leadership development classroom and listening to someone facilitate. You take a few notes, you go back to your office, and guess what? Tomorrow you've forgotten about it. No, we have to move on to a new way of learning. We have to bring people into the fold and understand what works for them and help them understand how do we function in the new state. You go to the next slide. So I want to tell you a personal story. I learned about change long before I knew what change was. It wasn't a professional moment. It was a deeply personal moment. At around the age of, I believe I was maybe 8 or 9, I found out on the playground with other kids that I was adopted. And I found out by another kid yelling out, well, that's why your mom is not your mom, you're adopted. And in that moment, my world and my reality shifted instantly. It wasn't just the information that I found out, it was how I found out. And this is part of what helped drive my entrepreneurial spirit, even when I didn't think I had one, and coming to terms with that, because it took me well over a decade to resonate with those things that were going through my mind. Why me? Why was I adopted? Why didn't my, mom want all of these things that were going through my mind? And so I made it my mission to say, change doesn't have to hurt. Change is definitely hard. We all know that, but it doesn't have to be painful to the point where you can't get through it. And so building Nexus Transformation Partners, part of that goal was to ensure that anytime someone was transitioning through a change, be it an org change, an M&A, job loss, or whatever the case may be, our goal was to ensure that they understood how they were going to be impacted, how their day-to-day was going to change, what was in it for them, what was not in it for them. Because I feel like people truly don't resist change, but what they resist is being changed without their knowledge, being changed without them understanding what's happening. Because I think when we can bring people along the journey, things go that much smoother. And so that's where my real deep drive for making change stick has come from, because I carried that childhood trauma with me for quite some time. And honestly, it's done a lot of good, because between my military time and going to school and educating myself and working with all of these Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 50, I've even worked with two of the top five Fortune 5 companies. And I see this in every company, all of these large conglomerates, even smaller organizations, they go through all of these changes and they do not think about how people are impacted. They think all they're thinking about is, how do I get this done on time, within scope, and within budget? But you can spend millions of dollars doing all of that. But if your people aren't coming along the journey with you, it's going to be it's going to be hell to pay. And I always say you're going to pay the devil. So I'd rather pay the devil I know than the devil I don't. Bring the people along the journey with you. Okay, you go to the next one. And this is why I say leadership development has to change, and the way we do it has to change. And it's very critical. And leadership isn't really about avoiding setbacks, because guess what? We're going to experience setbacks in everything we do every day. It's not about not dealing with them. It's about deciding what to do when they happen. And part of our Phoenix Leadership Academy, it's an academy we built to think about leadership a little bit differently. And so we think about leadership from everywhere from that informal leader, which is someone who doesn't have a leader or manager title. But guess what? They've been at the organization for a while. They're very influential. They know where all the bones are buried. They can tell you the landmines not to step on. And then we go from informal leader to that new and emergent leader, because guess what? I can guarantee you, each and every one of you on this call today can probably say, I have seen someone, or I may have been that person who was promoted into that leadership role because I was knocking it out the park as an individual contributor. And then when I got in that leadership role, I didn't realize there was such a difference in critical skill sets that I need. I didn't realize that, hey, once I'm someone's leader, I'm no longer their peer. The interaction has to change. The thought process has to change. The leadership skills have to change. So that's where, we focus on, and we go all the way up to mid-level manager. And so that's why I say it is critical, absolutely critical, that we readdress how we're addressing leadership, because leadership isn't just a title. Leadership is an act that we must make sure that we are intentional with doing. And leadership maturity isn't tied to a title. It's built through the discipline of rising. And that's exactly why I call it Phoenix Leadership Academy, because what does a phoenix do? It rises, right? And so we continue to rise again and again and again, not because we want to, but a lot of times because we have to. And option is not a failure. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So my mantra is this: if you develop leaders and show them how to rise, transformation really stops feeling disruptive and it starts to become something that an organization knows how to do. And that's the goal. And I said it earlier, leave you in a better self-sufficient, change-ready state than when I found you. Because lasting change happens when behavior becomes habits, right? And systems reinforce them. Because how many times have you guys probably gone to training, and maybe not at your current companies, but I know I've experienced this, where we've gone to training and you get back to your job and it's like, well, that's good, you've gone to that training, but guess what? That's not how we're going to do it here. If I don't have the system to reinforce change, it's not going to stick. Because you know what? People, your employees, your colleagues, they're not just engines. They are the heartbeats behind every change. Okay, you go to the next one. And when teams feel equipped, they move from resistance to ownership, really. And change and transformation becomes something they drive, not something that's done to them. And that's the key. You want to make people feel like they are a part of the change, not that the change is just being thrust upon them. And so this is where we talk about adapting to behavioral change. You could go to the next one. When people understand their behaviors and the behaviors of others, they can intentionally flex to meet the situation instead of reacting to it. That's why we focus on 16 behaviors. And, I'm not going to talk about those 16 behaviors, but there are 16 different behaviors that people can flex to adjust to. Now, we all have our own behavioral landscape, our own preferred, and if you know about DISC, you know about personality. So we all have our, fixed personality, or we have our own initial personality. But guess what? We're not all of one anything. We have a combination of everything in us, and we have to learn how to use that to our advantage and be able to flex. Because if we don't, we become rigid, and when we become rigid, then things don't get done, and transformation won't stick, and people won't adopt nor adapt to anything that we're doing, and it's just going to be a huge mess. So that brings me to talking about, what does the future look like? You go to the next one, yes. And the future of leadership truly is behavioral fluency. And what I mean by that is, I said it a few minutes ago, not only understanding your behavior, but understanding the behavior of those who report to you, understanding the behavior of your colleagues, of your peers, of your leaders, all of those things, because things happen for a reason. And I can tell you this: behavior will tell you the story long before any words are uttered. So that's why understanding behavioral fluency and how people act and respond. And don't just make judgment calls because you see someone acting or responding a certain way. That's why it's critical to understand behavioral fluency. And that's exactly why, we exist at Nexus, because again, I take everything that I've learned from my childhood, through my military, through my big four, through college, and I'm bringing it all to the table because I feel like we need to address the way life is today. Go to the next one. And because of that, we build leaders and teams that thrive during change. What we also do is, I think one of the biggest things that for Nexus Transformation Partners that we do is we combine change management, leadership development, and emotional intelligence together under one roof. And we call it transformational influence because at the end of the day, it's all about how you influence, how you understand, what's that capability you have. And when you grow people, transformation sticks. And that's where the real impact lives. It lives in the messy part of transformation. And understanding these things can only help you get better. You go to the next one. So I would like to wrap this up by saying everything that I've shared today, my consulting, my leadership, my entrepreneurship journey, all of these things ultimately point to a simple single truth that transformation either fails or succeeds on the heels of people. Organizations rarely struggle because they lack strategy. What I've seen more often is they struggle because human behavior wasn't intentionally considered in the design. What we do here at Nexus, our work focuses on strengthening those behavioral capabilities alongside change itself and helping leaders and teams develop a shared understanding of how they think, communicate, and also how they adapt under pressure. The reality also is, guys, when people better understand themselves, resistance tends to soften, collaboration improves, and change becomes more sustainable. Not because it's easier, because guess what? It's just like working out. Working out never gets easier. You only get stronger. That's why you're able to lift more. So when you're talking about change, change never becomes easier. You just get better at learning how to manage based on understanding behavior and moving shifts. So at its core, meaningful change isn't driven by systems alone. It's sustained when people grow into what the next chapter requires. And for you guys who are thinking about signing up with NACI, or if you haven't thought about it, I would strongly encourage you to do so because a lot of what I'm saying to you today has been a direct reflection of the things that the partnership with Houston City College, Dr. Ravi from Houston City College, NACI, and all of the people that I've worked with at NACI. It's a combination of all of these things and educational opportunities that I've had. So I'm going to wrap by asking you to ask yourself one question. Is your leadership style a bridge to your organization's future? Or is it the primary reason people are still stuck at their base camp and cannot move? So I want you to think about that. And the only way that you're going to change is to put that mirror to your face. Give yourself honest reflection. Because if you can't answer that question honestly, it's going to be hard to move from a leadership stance. So last slide. So here's my QR code. I would love to connect with each of you. If you have any questions about anything that I've spoken about, if you have any questions about my experience with NACI, I would love to answer any and all of your questions. And again, I thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this conversation and for allowing me to share my journey because transformation starts and ends with people. And these are the types of conversations that we need to be having today. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Pamela. A great job. We appreciate it.